My name's Alex, I'm 27. If you asked my parents, they'd probably say I was the difficult one in the family. Not because I was rebellious or irresponsible, actually the opposite. I worked hard, paid my own bills, kept my life on track. But in their eyes, that just made me the default problem solver, the one expected to step up whenever someone else in the family was struggling. And by someone else, I mean my older sister Emily. Emily's 30, but you'd never guess from how she lives. She's never held a steady job for long, always had an excuse for why she couldn't pay rent, and somehow convinced my parents none of it was her fault. She twisted every situation to make herself the victim. Her boss was out to get her roommates were toxic, and the job market was impossible. Meanwhile, she bounced between my parents' house and any friend naive enough to let her crash on their couch. I learned early if I wanted peace and stability, I needed to keep my distance. That wasn't easy, though. My parents always dragged me into her problems, guilt-tripping me about family loyalty or how lucky I was to have a good job. That's why I worked so hard to set clear boundaries, making it obvious I wasn't her personal safety net. But as I'd soon find out, my parents never really respected those boundaries. They just waited for the right moment to ignore them completely. It all blew up at a family dinner. I should have seen the signs the moment I walked in. Mom was extra sweet, Dad unusually quiet, and Emily barely looking at me. Something was off, but I had no clue how bad it'd get. Dinner started normal, with small talk and Mom's usual passive-aggressive comments about how she never sees me anymore. I mostly nodded, focused on my food, waiting for it to be over. Then, just as I thought I might escape without drama, Mom sat down, put her fork down, folded her hands, and dropped the bomb. "So, Alex," she said in that overly sweet tone she uses when about to say something I wouldn't like, "your sister's going to move in with you for a while." I almost choked on my food. The room went dead silent, like they expected me to just accept it. I didn't say anything yet. I just stared at them, waiting for the rest. Of course, there was more. Mom went on. "She's had a really rough time lately, and you have that nice place all to yourself. It just makes sense. You can help her get back on her feet, and she won't be a burden on us." A burden on them? Because heaven forbid my parents actually make Emily take responsibility for her life. Nope, that was my job, apparently. Still, I stayed quiet, watching the whole mess unfold like a slow-motion crash. Then Dad finally jumped in. "It's not like you can't afford it and she just needs a stable place to figure things out." That's when Emily spoke up, sounding like she'd rehearsed it. "It'll only be for a few months, and I can help out around the apartment, too." We all knew that was a lie. Emily never helped with anything, not even cleaning up after herself. But I still didn't react. I just nodded slightly, like I was considering it. Honestly, I was waiting for them to finish their speech, waiting for them to really commit to this idea, waiting for them to make the biggest mistake, assuming I'd actually agree. I let the silence stretch just long enough to make them uncomfortable. I felt their eyes waiting for me to react, anger, frustration, resistance, but I gave them none of that. Instead, I slowly exhaled, set my fork down, and said simply, "Okay." For a moment, no one spoke. Mom blinked, surprised I agreed so easily. Dad looked relieved, as if bracing for a fight. And Emily? She just smirked, like she'd won a battle she hadn't even fought. Mom asked, narrowing her eyes. "You're okay with this?" I shrugged. "Sure. If it helps Emily get back on her feet, I don't see why not." That was all it took. My parents relaxed instantly. Mom launched into a whole speech about how proud she was I was stepping up. Dad nodded like I'd done something amazing, and Emily, who'd been ready to argue, leaned back smugly. I could see her already planning how she'd move in, which room she'd claim, how she'd rearrange my place to her liking. Why not? She'd gotten away with it before. When we were kids, she stole my clothes and acted shocked when I got mad. In college, she borrowed my laptop and conveniently forgot to return it. When she got her own place and couldn't pay rent, she pressured our parents to guilt-trip me into covering for her. Just once, of course. But it never was just once. Emily wasn't just entitled. She was a pro at twisting reality, making herself helpless and me the reasonable one whenever I pushed back. But this time, she had no clue what was coming. "So, when's she moving in?" I asked casually, taking another bite, like this was just normal talk. Mom practically beamed. "We figured this weekend, so she can settle before job. Hunting again." Emily stretched like she hit the jackpot. And yeah, I was just getting started. She didn't have much, mostly clothes, a few boxes. Setting up wouldn't take long. I nodded again like it was all fine by me. "Sounds good. Just let me know what time, and I'll be there." That part at least wasn't a lie. I would definitely be there. Not at the apartment, though. No, I'd be somewhere much better, watching from a safe distance as Emily, my parents, and a car, full of her stuff, pulled up to my old apartment. The one I hadn't lived in for weeks. The one I sold. The one that now belonged to a new tenant who had no clue what was coming. And I wasn't going to stop them. Not yet. I wanted them to find out exactly what their little plan had gotten them into. The days before that weekend dragged on forever. Every time I thought about what was coming, a grin crept onto my face. But I stayed calm around my parents. I didn't want to tip them off. Instead, I let the plan unfold exactly how I imagined. A slow-motion train wreck, with me on the sidelines just watching it happen. Saturday came. I spent the day out of the apartment, doing things I'd been putting off for weeks. Perfect timing. My parents would show up expecting to unload Emily's stuff and soon realize something had gone very, very wrong. Around noon, my phone buzzed. I didn't recognize the number, so I let it go to voicemail. A minute later, it rang again. This time, I picked up. "Hello?" I said, trying to sound casual. "Alex?" My mom's voice came through, tight with frustration. "What's going on?" I could hear my dad's voice in the background, raising his tone too. They weren't angry yet, just confused and disoriented, like they'd walked into the wrong place. "What do you mean?" I asked, keeping my tone innocent. "We just got here," my mom said, her voice cracking. "What is this? The apartment's gone? The landlord says it was sold weeks ago and there's a new tenant living here now." I couldn't help it. My lips curled into a smile. "Oh, really? That's so weird. I didn't know anything about that," I replied, playing the part of the confused, uninvolved son. "I guess I should have mentioned it sooner, huh?" My dad's voice cut in sharply, frustrated. "What's going on, Alex? Why didn't you tell us? You promised Emily she could move in, and now we're stuck here with her stuff." It took everything in me not to laugh. I could hear Emily in the background now, her voice louder and panicked, like she was trying to figure out what was happening. It was music to my ears. "Look," I said calmly, "I don't know what to tell you. I thought you knew. I moved out a few weeks ago, sold the place. Didn't think I needed to mention it since, well, it wasn't really relevant to me anymore." There was a brief silence on the other end. "What do you mean, sold the place?" My mom sounded like she was trying to process what I'd just said. "You sold your apartment and didn't even tell us?" My mom said, disbelief thick in her voice. "Yeah," I said slowly, choosing my words carefully. "It was kind of last minute, honestly. I guess I didn't want to make a big deal out of it. But yeah, I moved out. New chapter and all that." My dad's voice rose in pitch. "So what are we supposed to do now, Alex? You can't just drop something like this on us. Emily had plans and we've already packed her things. Don't you think we deserve to know what's going on?" I leaned back in my chair, trying to hide the smirk creeping onto my face. I was loving this. You know, I really thought you guys knew, I said, drawing it out. I guess I assumed you were in the loop. You know how I can be, quiet, keeping to myself. Maybe I should have called when I moved, but honestly, I didn't think it was that important. You didn't ask and I didn't offer. There was a pause. The frustration was heavy on the other end of the line. My mom's voice had that edge of helplessness now, like she'd been completely blindsided. But you told us you were fine there. You said you were happy with your apartment. Yeah, I was, I replied smoothly, adding just enough detachment to make it sound casual. I didn't really expect to give it away like that, but the offer was too good to refuse. A heavy silence hung for a moment, broken only by the distant sound of Emily grumbling in the background. My dad was the first to speak again, but now his voice was trembling with anger. Why didn't you tell us, Alex? He asked, accusatory. You could have at least given us a heads up. Now we're stuck in this mess with Emily. I cut him off. Look, Dad, you're acting like I did something wrong. I'm just living my life. This was my decision. You know how things go with me. I do what works for me, and I don't check in with everyone else every step of the way. I'm not a kid anymore. My mom jumped in before Dad could respond. So what are we supposed to do now? Are you going to fix this, or should we just drag her stuff back home? I let the question hang for a second before answering. Well, I said, pausing for effect, I guess that's up to you. You could always, figure it out on your own. I'm sure there's a nice couch somewhere for Emily to crash on. Another long silence. I could practically feel the tension through the phone. My mom's next words were barely audible, mixed with disbelief and anger. This isn't fair, Alex. You're just going to leave us to deal with this? I leaned back even further in my chair. Look, I'm sorry. I guess I should have told you sooner, but sometimes life just happens. You can't expect me to always be the one picking up the pieces. Emily's voice cut through again, louder this time, a mix of frustration and panic. What is all this, Alex? I grinned. I don't know what you want me to say. Maybe you should have figured things out yourself before relying on others to fix your problems. I heard her muttering under her breath, which made me grin even wider. But I wasn't done yet. I had them right where I wanted. Anyway, gotta run, I said casually, cutting the conversation short. Good luck with everything. I'm sure it'll work out. With that, I hung up, my fingers still buzzing from the tension I just left behind. I didn't know it then, but this was only the beginning. The rest of the afternoon was a strange mix of satisfaction and anticipation as I let the chaos. I'd unleashed simmer for a bit. I knew my parents weren't the type to just give up. Sure, they'd put up a front of confusion, but that was just the first stage. Once they realized they were truly stuck, that's when the real drama would start. And Emily? She'd probably play the victim, as usual. But this time, I had no plans to let them off the hook. By the time I got back to my apartment, the sun was dipping below the horizon, casting a soft orange glow over everything. I walked through the door, locked it behind me, and settled onto the couch to unwind. I was calm, even guilt-free. This was payback. Simple, poetic revenge for all the times they took advantage of me, manipulated me, and made me feel like I was just a backup plan when things didn't go their way. About an hour later, there was a knock at the door. Instantly alert, I checked. The peephole. My heart skipped a beat. It was them. My parents, Emily, and, wait for it, her stuff. The car was parked out front, the trunk open with boxes and bags piled high, like a scene straight out of a bad sitcom. For a moment, I just stood there staring through the peephole, feeling a sick sort of glee. They had actually tracked me down. They had no idea I was living here now. That was the best part. They thought they were just showing up at the new place, my old place, but they were about to walk straight into a confrontation. I opened the door slowly, making sure I was calm, collected, and in control. Alex? My mom's voice came first, hesitant, almost pleading. We tried calling, but you didn't pick up. Well, we managed to find out where you were living now. I raised an eyebrow. Oh, did you? How'd you manage that? Never mind that, my dad cut in, sounding defensive. We need to talk. You need to make this right. You did say Emily could move in here, and now she's got her things. We don't have anywhere else to go. I leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed casually. That's the thing, though, isn't it? I never said Emily could move in here. My dad's eyes widened. I could tell his patience was wearing thin. Come on, Alex. Don't make this harder than it has to be. You can't just leave us, hanging like this. We came all this way and now you're just going to refuse to help your sister out? What kind of brother are you? Emily, standing just behind them, was glaring at me. I could almost see her mind working, piecing it together, in real time. This is ridiculous, Alex. You said you'd let me move in, and now you're acting like you don't even know us. We've been part of your life long enough for you to be decent about this. Is that so? I said, holding back a smile, faded as the reality hit them hard. You had no right to just walk into my apartment like it was some hotel. The shock was slow but brutal. This place was mine, my actual home, and they had come here with Emily's bags expecting a free ride. Emily's face burned red with fury. What is this, Alex? You're seriously going to do this to me after everything? I stayed silent a moment, watching their expressions shift from confusion to frustration, then to embarrassment. This was the moment they understood. They'd been played. And just to tighten the grip, I took a step closer and said, Look, I don't know how else to say this. This is my apartment. I didn't sell it. I didn't give it away. I'm not offering a free place for anyone. Not anymore. My parents looked like they were trying to process it all. My mom seemed ready to argue but stopped herself. The idea that I, the one who always got pushed around, was now standing firm was almost too much. You lied to us, Alex? My dad growled, voice thick with anger. You lied about everything. You knew this would happen, and now you're just leaving us to deal with your sister's problems. I shrugged. I didn't lie. You just didn't ask the right questions. Emily stepped forward, hands on her hips, glaring. You're not even a real brother. I'm family, Alex. You're just throwing me out like this? What happened to having each other's backs? I looked at her, expression blank. I'm not throwing you out, Em. I'm just not opening the door. The tension was suffocating, like a storm about to break. I was the calm right before chaos. I could hear Emily's voice rising, frustrated and desperate. My dad paced, muttering, my mom on the edge of tears, flushed with anger. Then Emily snapped, Fine, if you won't let me in, we'll just have to make you. My heart skipped as she stepped toward the door. For a second, I thought she might try to force her way in. That was the moment I decided enough was enough. I took a deep breath, stepped forward, and pulled out my phone. Without a word, I dialed. Hello? I said, voice steady and calm. I need to report trespassing. My family froze, faces pale as they realized what I was doing. I didn't. Look away, calmly explaining to the operator. I've asked my family to leave. They're refusing. They're trying to move into my apartment without permission, and I feel unsafe. Emily's face twisted in disbelief and anger. My mom went completely silent. My dad looked like he was figuring out how to save face. This is going to end badly for you, Emily, my dad muttered venomously. I smiled faintly, steady as ever. We'll see about that. As I ended the call, the weight of my choice settled deep inside me. The next step wasn't mine anymore. It was theirs to face. A siren wailed faintly in the distance, the only warning before the police showed up. My family stood frozen, wide-eyed, hoping I'd back down last minute. But I didn't move. I was done. The officer who stepped out was tall, with cropped brown hair and a no-nonsense stare. She looked at me, then at my parents and Emily, who shuffled awkwardly on my doorstep like kids caught sneaking in. "Good evening," she said, firm but polite. "I understand there's an issue here?" I nodded, voice calm but sharp. "Yes, officer. These people," I gestured to my parents and sister, "are trespassing. They showed up expecting to move in without my permission. I've asked them to leave several times, and now I'm worried. They might try to force their way in." The officer glanced at my parents, then Emily, tone direct but not unkind. "Is this true?" My parents hesitated, clearly reluctant to admit they'd messed up. Emily was first to speak, voice full of frustration and denial. "He's lying," she snapped, crossing her arms defensively. "He invited me here. We came to move in, like he said. Now he's trying to throw me out. After everything I've done for him, I'm his sister. I deserve this." The officer didn't flinch. "Ma'am, if Mr. Alex has told you this is his property and asked you to leave, then you were trespassing. You can't just show up uninvited and expect to be accommodated." I could see my parents squirming under her gaze. "Look, officer, we didn't mean any harm," my dad said, hands raised. "We thought Alex would be fine with it. We've helped him before. He owes us. This isn't fair." Her expression didn't change. "Sir, I understand your expectations, but that doesn't give you the right to violate someone else's property or boundaries. You need to leave now." The tension was thick enough to cut with a knife. My parents exchanged angry looks, but they knew they had no choice. The officer was patient but firm, not letting them cause a scene. She turned to Emily. "You can either leave quietly now, or we'll have to escort you out." Emily growled, furious, her mind clearly racing for a way to fight back. But before she could say more, the officer stepped forward with authority. The officer's voice was firm. "Ma'am, this is your last warning. If you don't leave, I will place you under arrest for trespassing." Those words hit my sister like a ton of bricks. Slowly, reluctantly, she stepped back from the door, glaring at me as if I'd somehow betrayed her. My parents followed, and I caught my mom's face twisted with frustration and shame as they all started to leave. The officer escorted them out, and I stayed in the doorway, watching them go. It wasn't a moment of satisfaction, not really. It felt more like an exhausting relief. The drama, the manipulation, the entitlement, it was all finally over. Before leaving, the police officer glanced back at me. "If there are any more issues, don't hesitate to call us again, okay?" she said softer this time. "Thank you, officer," I replied with a nod. Just like that, my parents and Emily were gone. The officer locked the door behind her, and my life finally felt back to normal. It took a while to process everything. Honestly, I hadn't realized how much weight their constant presence had placed on me. It wasn't just about moving in. It was years of being expected to drop everything for them, being the one they could manipulate whenever it suited them. I'd never really had a space or life of my own before. But now, I did. The next day, I spent time sorting through the aftermath. I knew I'd have to face the fallout sooner or later, but for the first time, I didn't feel responsible for fixing it all. My phone was filled with missed calls from my parents, angry voicemails, and Emily's texts, full of insults and demands, calling me selfish, heartless, and worse. But I didn't care. I blocked all their numbers. It's been a couple of weeks since that day, and things have finally settled down. I've found some peace, been able to focus on my own life, my career, and my friends. I can breathe without constantly looking over my shoulder, wondering when the next favor would come up or when they'd show up asking for something. Now, I'm curious. What do you all think? Was I too harsh? Did I go too far? I'm not asking for sympathy, but I'd love to hear your thoughts on how I handled it. Did I do the right thing, or could I have done it differently? Let me know.